After e4, c5, knight f3, black plays knight f6, so the Nimzowitsch Sicilian is on the board. This is my favorite defense, and by the time I finish the entire repertoire through this channel, you'll have your own favorite Sicilian defense as well. So after knight c3, we're still going through this, and at d5, right? In the previous videos, we went through the all swap variation. Let's keep going through that for one more video, but not the whole swaps. So white takes the pawn and black takes back. So what happens after the normal bishop to c4, putting more defense over the knight? Black plays, putting more attack over the knight. Black plays e6 to defend it more. And after castling, black develops with bishop to e7. And after rook to e1, very normal moves, natural moves. This will happen 99% of the time. Black now gambles a pawn for the sake of development. In fact, black now castled. And the vast majority of time, what happens now here is white happily takes the pawn, but that's a mistake. So let's see what happens. Knight takes, pawn takes, and after bishop takes and queen takes, now the white recaptured the piece, and white is up a pawn. Black now develops knight to c6, attacking the rook, and the rook's got nowhere to go. The rook will have to retreat. There are no squares available, and if the rook were to go to c7, the only square available on the 7th rank, then queen to d6 will create problems. So after the rook goes back, okay, let's look at rook to e3 or e1. e2 is silly, obviously, we all know why, because then you can pin the knight and put more pressure and so on. Rook to e3 puts defense over the knight, especially because white knows we're going to play bishop to g4, which is our best move. And also we're going to play knight to d4 to put more pressure on the knight. White will have to give up the pawn structure in front of the king or the exchange. We're going to look at two options here. h3 attacking the knight right away, we can take it. And after queen takes, to develop the queen, otherwise the white player is just too backwards with development. Let's remember that the fact that white is not able to develop this dark square bishop anytime soon will allow black to create back rank threats. Now black even affords to swap pieces even though he's now down material, because this is a tactic. Knight to d4 is going to win this pawn, and there's nothing that can be done to stop it. Rook to c3 will fall into knight e2 obviously. So after rook to d3, reaching the 7th rank again after the black maybe takes the pawn. This is an idea. Black plays rook f to e8. The idea obviously is that after the check and then the knight in e2, there could be more attack over the bishop. So for example, c3 trying to kick the knight away, rook check, king moves, and then knight e2 wins the bishop. So instead of c3, what happens after b3, trying to develop the bishop to the only possible way? Well, knight takes pawn, rook moves, and now rook check, king has to move, and knight to b4 will win for black. Black is going to win the pawn in a2 and put more attack over the bishop. It's inevitable. If rook to e3, desperately looking for a swap, then simply rook to d1, keep the pinned piece. And after rook to c3, putting more defense over the bishop, black finishes the masterpiece with rook to d8. Kicking the knight away doesn't work because of knight to d3, putting even more pressure, but also attacking f2. After rook to a1, the idea of playing bishop to d2 to support the rook and make a swap, then still knight to f2, and black is winning the endgame. Bishop b2, it just doesn't work because of rook takes the pawn here in d2, and it's attacking the bishop. If rook protects the bishop, knight d1 wins, and if bishop just moves back to c1, then again we just pin the bishop back again. Black is up 2 pawns, and it will be for the endgame. The white player can't really take the pawn in c5. It's not free because it comes with this move. Check, king moves, and then knight e4. So let's make a recap. Knight f6, and then knight c3, d5. And after take, white continues development with bishop c4, e6. Castle, bishop e7. Rook e1, very normal moves. We can castle now. And now knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, and then takes. White is up a pawn, but knight to c6. We said that the rook has to go back. So we're still looking at rook e3. Bishop to g4 attacks the knight, h3, and now take. What happens if white takes with the rook? Well, black now plays queen to h5, pinning the rook. And black's idea is to play knight to e5. So let's say random move, c3, I don't know, whatever. knight to e5 is too strong, right? Obviously it wins. So a move like g4 seems possible to get out of the pin, but then queen to g6. Black is putting pressure on c2 because we're going to play knight to d4 anyway. d3 and b3 look natural right now. Let's see how it is. Like either way, the moves are going to be the same. So b3, knight to d4, attacking the rook, and after the rook moves to c3 to put more defense over c2, then simply rook a2 e8, finishing development. And d3 cannot be played also because of knight e2 right now, right? Bishop to a3. For example, might be an idea, the bishop takes the pawn and then traps the rook, but still knight check, and then taking the rook will come with an attack on the queen. This will allow the black player to be in time to save material. So after the best move, which is king to f1, black continues with queen to c6. We're going for this checkmate threat. And we're also going to stop the position there because it's just too dominating for black. Black is completely winning. When the king moves, you can make a fork once again with the knight. So in this position, once again, we have to take the knight. We went through everything. Queen takes, rook takes. What happens after pawn takes, which is really ugly, but it's kind of the last thing we need to look at before we move on. Rook a to e8 now. Black has full control over the file. Swapping is favorable, obviously, for black. The idea of the black player is to push the rooks to get to the checking squares. The queen will be able to go to h5 or something like that. And anytime white decides to swap, then he will keep this weakness forever. So let's just quickly look at these two ideas. If white plays c3 with the idea of playing d4, which is fairly typical in such a game, then now we can even afford to swap because there's a tactic. So basically rook takes, pawn takes, and now knight e5 to put more attack over f3, and we can't really be stopped. One move could be king to f2 to put more defense, but then knight check, king e2, queen c4 threatening a discovered check, b3, and now simply knight double check. King to e1, the knight is trapped, but we can play check, and we're saving the game. So in this position, instead of king f2, what happens if f4, saving the pawn? Then black plays the incredible rook to e8, completely careless of the knight, because this is going to be enough for us to checkmate. Black can't develop any of his pieces. So for example, if pawn takes, rook takes. Best moves by white will be h4, stopping the rook, but still rook to e6. Again, even white playing the absolute best move, still rook to queen f1, rook g6 check, king moving to h2, queen to h5, threatening the pawn. This cannot be stopped. If queen to f2, then rook f4, and if king to h3, then g5. Black wins, obviously. And if white plays queen to h3 here, then queen check. You can't block because of the checkmate. So king h1, queen e1 check, king h2, and then check again, and then here, and then here. In this position, we mentioned c3, d4, that type of idea doesn't work. What happens after d3? This looks more normal, more solid. As mentioned before, well, here it doesn't make sense to swap because the bishop can take. Anyway, rook to e6. We're trying to infiltrate and attack the king, exploiting the weakness. There's not much to do for white. White just should develop the pieces. Bishop to d2 and bishop to c3 will be interesting. Eventually can play queen f1. Let's go on a few moves. So knight to d4. There's enough defense over f3 now, but we're going to swap rooks and then be able to take this pawn. Any other move with the king will be very silly because then you can just check him, and it's going to be terrible. Any move with the queen going out of the defense of f3 doesn't make sense. So let's just see how to continue. If c3 comes for real, is that, oh, and by the way, if rook takes, you can just take back, and that makes it so much easier for black. Now here we can take the rook once again, and after pawn takes, knight f3 check. So after king f2 and knight to g5, black is just winning here. Best move by white will be queen to h1, but after queen to d3 we can stop the line here. The black rook is coming into play soon, and black's got a crashing advantage. One more thing, from this position we went to bishop g4. What happens if white tries to develop, basically white ignores all this. I mean, white tried h3 already, and we went through everything that happens. What happens if white leaves it like that? Just develops the bishop here. Okay, same thing. Knight to d4, putting more pressure over the knight, and after bishop to d2, the knight with an attack on the queen, pawn takes, and now the white player might think of taking the knight because you know all the mess that knight has been doing from f3. So how to react in this situation? Rook a to e8, again, similar patterns, and after bishop takes, you can take back with the pawn, comes with an attack on the rook. Both moves with the rook now, well, taking the rook here it just wins for black, obviously. Let's see this move, rook to e2, comes with queen check, king h1, and now queen to f6, threatening to put in f3 with a check. Best move by white is to take the rook so that the queen defends f3, rook takes back, and after king to g2, black continues with rook to e5 and should be winning the game shortly. So in this position, after the pawn takes in d4, what happens if the rook goes to e1? Same stuff, queen g5 check, king moves, and now queen to f5, targeting the pawn, but we're also attacking the rook so we can take the pawn afterwards. So after king to g2, queen check from g6, and the king moves back. Now we can take the rook, queen takes back, and now we can take this pawn here. And now look at white's isolated pawns, they look terrible. After white's most active move, which is queen e4, trying to reunite the pawn structure, and also attacking the pawn in d4. Black, of course, doesn't help white with that and takes the pawn in d2, and white can win a pawn as well. But now black can win this one, and black is winning an easy endgame. So from the start, after e4, c5, knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, d5, take, bishop c4, we defend the knight with the pawn. Castle and bishop e7, rook e1, and castle. The most normal moves you can possibly imagine. So white is we're still looking at this line where white wins a pawn. Bishop takes, queen takes, and rook e7. Now knight to c6. What happens if the rook goes back to e1? Again, same pattern, bishop to g4. Here we're going to look at two moves. After d3, to develop the other bishop, looks like a very natural move. Then knight to d4, double attack on the knight. So after rook to e5, by the way, this doesn't work because you can just simply take the rook, knight takes, and then you go up material. So what happens after bishop e3? Developing and attacking the knight, then simply knight takes, pawn has to take back, and now bishop takes the pawn with an attack on the queen. Queen has to move, queen to d2, and now queen to f5, and it's game over, right? It's unstoppable because you're gonna go make a check and then a checkmate, and you can't stop it. Not even like bishop f4 to put the bishop between the queen and the king, but then simply queen h3, right? So that didn't work. In this position, we mentioned d3. It allows black to play knight d4. It's just too strong. What happens after h3? Then take, and now knight d4, attacking here and here. This cannot be stopped. White plays rook to d1, best move, but still knight c2, attacking the rook, rook to b1, and now black continues with b6, consolidating this pawn structure. And after b3, to develop the bishop, rook f to d8, putting pressure on this pawn. Still bishop to b2. It looks like white will play a normal game, but now rook to d3. Black will play a favorable endgame. Let's just have a look at a few more moves, and then we will close this line and this video. Bishop to c3, for instance, put more defense over the pawn, since we know white knows we're going to double up the rooks. But still, rook a to d8. And after white's best option, we just simplify everything. b4 is met by knight takes, then bishop takes, pawn takes, rook takes, rook takes, rook takes, rook takes. And after white's best moves, rook to c4, threatening mate, and king to f8, black is winning this endgame very easily. Because after rook check and king moves, rook check, but then rook d7, the majority on the queen side will win.